Okay, so I'm totally going to cover this in my talk. But codetriage.com, you go there and you're like, hey, I want to subscribe to like Rails/Rails and like become a better programmer and get involved with open source. And then it will send you one open issue per day. And it's any GitHub repo. And so it's a great way to kind of get involved with open source. And like I actually built this for me to use, and it just sent me like one issue, and then like I have done this for like the past like 8 or 9 months, and then at some point in time, somebody from Rails was like, hey, we want to give you like access to actually close issues because you do so much work with issues. So definitely like if you put in work with the open source communities, like it for sure pays off.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Thanks for that. So I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, welcome everyone, or some partially of everyone. Please don't be shy. We have like seats up in the front. Like I know it's super crowded out back, but like I would like to not see white seat backs and people standing in the back. Okay, so my name is Richard Schneeman, or @Schneems on the internet. In the US, a lot of people have problems pronouncing that. So we can actually, or sometimes it helps I say it's pronounced a little bit like schnauzer, or sometimes like schnapps, if you enjoy either one of those. So some people who know me might say that I'm married to Ruby. I've been doing Ruby a long time. People who actually know me say that I'm married to Ruby because I am literally married to a woman named Ruby. We got married in April, and sadly she couldn't come. This is my first time in India, so namaste. So a quick little story about like one day she was just like sitting on the couch, and she was like, "Would you still love me if my name was Python?" I think we all know the answer to that. Okay. So I also have an animal with an absurd name. So this is Hans Peter von Wolf V. He is actually the 5th dog that I've had named this. And they've all been dachshunds. So it's kind of a long name because he's a long dog. I've done a couple of gems you might have used. One of them is called Sextant. It allows you to see your Rails routes inside of your browser, so you don't even have to run rake routes. It saves you time. You're going to love it. It's also incorporated into Rails 4, so you don't even need it, and it's like even better. Also, Wicked Gem, it helps you build step-by-step controllers. And as was previously mentioned, the latest thing I've been kind of working on nights and weekends is codetriage.com. So whenever you go into like a hospital, or like there's something wrong with you, like you go in and you tell this nurse like generally what's wrong, and then they point you at like the right doctor to go and see. And so I was like, well, wouldn't it be great if, you know, we only have like a handful of these core team members on a lot of these libraries. Wouldn't it be amazing if instead of only like 8 people reading 500 issues, if we could have like 500 people reading 500 issues? And so you go there, you sign up, you pick any kind of project that you're interested in, and it'll just send you one open source issue a day. You can just read it and get more familiar with the types of issues, or you can comment on it and be like, hey, it's been a really long time since anybody's talked about this, or you can fix bugs. Like it's very open-ended. It just sends you an issue a day. So that's codetriage.com. I highly recommend you check it out. So a little bit more about me. As mentioned, I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Texas. And actually I've had a large number of people like come up and be like, hey, I love your videos. So if you haven't checked them out, you can go to schneems.com/utrails. And I've got about 40 hours of video lectures that I've posted onto YouTube, as well as exercises, quizzes, all that kind of good stuff. But the best part about being a professor at the University of Texas is I can say, good news, everyone, if there's any Futurama fans in the crowd. Okay, so I also happen to work for Heroku. If you're not familiar with the company, our goal is to kind of optimize developer happiness. We have a couple of applications and websites that have run on our platform. And at Heroku, I am on the Ruby task force. So of course, because I'm on the Ruby task force, this means I am a Ruby task force member. Yeah. And this guy is one of my coworkers, if you weren't aware. We hired Matt, Snobu, and Koichi, all from the Ruby team, and I got the pleasure of meeting him at, I mean, I've met him a number of times, but like hanging out with him in Japan for RubyConf, it was like awesome. He was sitting there like handing people like bento lunches, and I was like, great, he gives you like Ruby, now he gives you like bento lunch. It's like amazing. So I came to RubyConf India to do two things. I came to eat naan and talk Ruby. And I'm all out of naan. Okay, so just a warning, I have like non-jokes in here, and some of them might fall a little bit flat. All right, so please, I don't see a lot of them out, which is amazing. You guys are incredible, but please close your laptops, unless, I do have a caveat, I'm not unreasonable. If you're commenting on Rails/Rails issues, keep them open, like, let's close those issues. Okay, so we've all been there as like developers. We're looking at this huge library or this like massive chunk of code, or you're just talking to someone, they're like, oh yeah, no, that comment, it's not valid. Like, why would we bother changing the comments? Or like, we got this from somebody else, we got this from somebody else, we got this from somebody else. Like, it just works. Don't touch it. Or like, docs? Come on, this is Ruby. Like, look at the source code. Like, that is, I've heard that, like, in not joking, like, way too many times. So, so this talk is all about how to kind of like get into these like large libraries, large code bases. It can be your code base. Get info and then kind of get around and ultimately do things. So, first of all, we need to get in. One of the things, like my favorite bundler feature, is actually bundler open, or just bundle open. So you can just call bundle open and then gem name, and if that thing is in your gem file, then boom, you get it right in your favorite editor. So here we're opening Wicked, which is an amazing gem written by a dashingly good-looking developer. I've been told. And okay, one important thing though is that in order for this to work, in order for this to actually just pop open in your editor, you have to set your editor. So if you use MacVim or MVim or Vim or whatever, you can just set this in your bash RC file. Or I am actually alternating between MacVim and Sublime Text. So sometimes I have that. And then you can double check by echoing that editor, and like whenever you run the bundle open command, it's like right there, right at your fingertips. You can grep around, super easy. Okay, so that was actually it for getting in. That's how we get into these libraries that you have inside of your projects. Now we want to be able to get out. Did anybody go to Jonathan's talk on debuggers? Yeah, it's like really good talk. I learned a lot about crabs. It makes sense if you were there. Okay, for this talk, like, debuggers are amazing, but for this talk, we are not going to use debuggers. In this talk, all we need is puts. Because that's the way I roll. And honestly, I switch between so many different projects a day and like so many other things that you can't always have a debugger like bundled in and like in the right version. So also, I want to just share a short little story with you guys. In the military, whenever they came up with these projectile weapons and they started actually fighting with them, they had this big problem where teaching somebody how to point and aim a rifle or gun or any kind of projectile is actually really hard. And then ammo is really expensive and training time is really expensive. So at some point in time, somebody figured out like, well, hey, instead of like teaching them to do this properly, what if we could just show them where their last shot went and then they could just move from there. So they don't even actually, like, it's kind of like a hack, right? So they built these tracer rounds that actually burns a little bit slower and it leaves a streak across, across the battlefield. And then eventually somebody was like, oh yeah, it also kind of points back to the guy who's shooting. So maybe, maybe not the greatest idea in the world, but anyway, in Ruby, we have a tracer round, and this is our tracer round. Like, you don't have to know exactly where it's going, but when you see it. Okay, and just to kind of like prove my point, like I'm kind of not entirely joking here. Like, you know, all right, does anybody see it? Okay, well, if you didn't see it before, like it's like blaringly obvious that you know, we just have this series of delimiters, and like you can use squigglies, or you can use like smiley faces, or like UTF-8 snowmen, or whatever you want. But I just like equals. It gives me nice kind of like vertical white space, or whatever kind of space you want to talk about. Okay, before I'm gonna be showing some code and actually talking about quite a bit of code, and I just wanted to standardize on notation. I know we have a bunch of people of varying skill levels. Some of you have probably heard this before, but I'm going to be using this notation a lot, something with an uppercase letter, and this is going to be a class or a module. Then the thing after it is going to be a method name, and the thing inside of it, if it's a period, then that indicates it's an actual method on the class or on that singleton. If I have a pound, then it's not a class method. It's an instance method, so that we can call it on multiple different instances of those. So also, just another word of caution for the rest of this talk. I'm actually not going to be using nil, and I'm not going to be using null, but of course I'm going to be using non. I warned you. Like, I was just searching for pictures of non, and this showed up. There's a whole category for it. Anyway, just a quick little interactive. Who uses Ruby 2.0? Or has used? What about 193? 187? Okay, so there's still some hands out there. Big warning, like, Ruby 187 is like end of life in a matter of days. At the end of June, I think there is a community effort maybe to sponsor some more development, but the official, actual 187 official like guy is no longer to be doing security updates to this. So highly recommend trying 2.0. Also recommend trying out JRuby. That was mentioned by somebody had a good question about that earlier. And 2.0 is now the default on Heroku for all new Rails apps, or not for all new Ruby apps, and it works with Rails 4 out of the box whenever that's released. Okay, so that was a little bit of a side note. We had some non in there. Let's actually get around, and to do that, we're going to be using just pure Ruby. Often I have this problem just where I say, okay, you know, I'm looking at a method and like I see the things the method's saying, but I have no idea how people are actually using it. What are they passing in? Like, where is this being called from? Maybe it's a very generic method name. In order to get that kind of information, I can use kernel caller. So this is going to produce a backtrace. Of course, everything that I'm going to be showing here, you can get information from rubydoc.org. But like sometimes you go there and like you look at the documentation and you're like, what is going on? Just in short, kernel caller gives you the backtrace. Whenever you use it, you just put it in your code like this, and it gets called, and you've seen this before anytime you've gotten an exception. But we've got the file name, the path to that direct file, so there's only going to be one. We've got that exact line number of where that was called. And even better, we've got the method name, or I guess just kind of icing on top. So we're going to be using kernel caller to figure out where things are being called from. Okay, so that's kind of how we got there. But like, what about where we're going? So once you're looking at a method, it's calling other methods, and you're like, whoa, we're in Ruby, and people can like duck punch and monkey type and like all this other kind of crazy stuff. So there's a common question I have of where is this method defined? And one really easy way we can do that, well, actually, first of all, this is like my super secret like favorite class in Ruby that like nobody ever talks about, but is like super crazy useful. It's the method class. It's also the most confusing class to talk about because it's a method class that has methods. Some of them are class methods, like Okay, in order to use this, the easiest way is actually to use object.method. So on anything that is an instance of object, which is basically everything in Ruby, we can call .method in it and get an actual instance of this. So for instance, we have a string of like hello world, and we can call .method, pass an uppercase to it, and the result of that will be a method. So we can call .class, so you see the thing that is resulting is actually a method. We had Steve's functional reactive programming. This is a way that we're actually passing a method as a function, as a first class object. And once we have that, you can actually call on it just like a block. So just like you can save lambdas and procs and blocks, you can do that with actual methods without having to route them through that. So that's kind of just a cute little trick. But again, the problem was, where's this method defined? So method has a method called source location. So let's say we've got a model called like user.rb, and then we've got this thing called like GitHub URL. So if we pass in a symbol of GitHub URL to our method, and then call .source location on that, it will tell us exactly where it came from, or exactly where it's defined. So it'll give us the file, and it'll give us the line number. So you don't have to wonder, like, did somebody monkey patch this, or did somebody like overwrite this, did somebody like subclass this, or anything else. You know exactly where that is being called. So, okay, that's kind of like the general gist in the introduction. You might be like, oh, okay, those are like sort of neat and like sort of interesting, but like, is that really actually useful? So this is something I ran into in real life. I actually on codetriage.com. In order to send mail, you have to specify a host, because if you've ever tried to use a path helper inside of an email, when somebody clicks that, it doesn't know where to go because it doesn't have, like, say, an example.com or a codetriage.com. So if you include HTTP in that host, as sometimes I might be tempted to do, the URL that it generates is going to be http://example.com, and that's not right. The worst part about it is you'll actually still send out emails. None of your tests will fail until your customers are like, whoa, none of these, I just ordered this thing from you and paid you a bunch of money and your emails don't work. Like, is this some sort of a scam? So in order to get this to work, you actually need to remove the host from it, remove the HTTP. So in hindsight, it makes total sense, but like, we should do something about this. Like, we should raise an exception, or like, hey, we already know exactly what your intent is. Why don't we just like replace it for you inline? And I was like, that'd be amazing, but like, how do we do this? So the problem is, let's remove that automatically. Like, we know generally what we want to do, but like, where? We know this is in Rails, but have you ever actually looked in Rails? Like, it's huge. So in order to kind of figure this out, I was like, all right, well, I'll start with the top. I know that it gets called in link to. I'm calling link to, and somehow that option is making it in somewhere. So I get the method of link to, and then I call source location. From there, it's going to give me, and it says, oh, it's an action pack. I did this a little while ago in 3.2.12, and it gives me the file name and the line number. So we can go to bundle open, we do bundle open action pack, and boom. So this is actually in that file and in those line numbers. And when you actually look at that like kind of section of code, you're like, okay, I still have like no idea what's going on, but it's almost not, we know the output of this is a link, and links need hrefs, and we can say, all right, it looks like this href is being built here, so it looks like we're passing in a URL from there. So okay, we're calling URL4. Some of us, you might have used URL4 before, and you're like, oh, this is great, this is perfect, like URL4. Like, there's only one URL4 in Rails, obviously. Then you're like Command F on the project, and you're like def URL4, and it's like 13 matches across 12 files. Like, 13 matches across 12 files. It's like come on. You have no idea where this is actually being defined. And we can use method.sourceLocation again here. So we're going to have a tracer. We're going to put our method source location, and when we do this, we get that, okay, hey, it's in something called URL helper, which kind of makes sense for URL4 to be in. We go in there and we're like, at this point in time, I'm stoked. I'm digging in. I got my method source location. Like, I'm good to go. Like end of presentation, right? Just end method source location. And then I'm like, all right, okay, option something, that doesn't matter. What happens next? Oh, super, wait a second. So super does this thing where it like looks up ancestors and then it calls them like in reverse order that they were loaded, and I'm like, all right, and I tried like method source location and it tells you where super's defined and it doesn't really help. So I'm like, okay, well here, I'll just look at all of the ancestors and I'll like obviously figure this out. So if you're not familiar with the ancestors method on a class, you can take a look at module ancestors. And just for kind of a simple example, if you call foo.class.ancestors, it'll look something like this. You'll get string, which is what it is, and then comparable, object, kernel, basic object. So it's pretty simple. If you called super on string, it would likely go to comparable if it has that method, or it'll keep on kind of going up the chain. So I was like, all right, I got this. I'm going to just call like self.class.ancestors, and then it looks something kind of like this. And then I did something kind of like this. And at this point in time, I'm just thinking like, am I just using like too much Ruby? Am I like trying to be like too clever here? Like, I just want to know what's going on. Is that so much to ask? But of course, the solution is that we needed more Ruby. So quickly, we'd like to also introduce method defined. You can just call this on a class. And it will return back either true if it is defined. So string, foo is a string in this case. So our class.methodDefined uppercase is uppercase defined on a string. So the answer should be yes, so true. Now 99 is like fixed num, integer, so it should not be defined. So now we have false. So that's pretty reasonable. We also have module instance method. So previously, we were actually using instances and just using the method on them. So what happens if we don't have an instance of it? You can just directly use the class itself. It's a very small distinction, but it's really useful in this case. So you can just call user.instance method and pass it in GitHub URL. It's exactly the same as calling .method on an instance of that class. The terminology is like, sorry. So, okay, what were we doing? We were like looking up something with ancestors all right. So I had something like this, and I was like, all right, well, let's iterate over each one of those ancestors and see. So that's going to return classes, and we're going to ask ourselves, does that class respond to URL4? Does an instance of that class, or is that method defined on URL4? If it is, we're going to pull out the instance method from it, and we're going to grab the source location. So this is going to go through absolutely all of our ancestors. And when I ran it, I got something kind of like this. We got our handy dandy tracer, and you might notice that there's kind of a repeating pattern, a little bit of a similarity. So we play like which one of these things is not like the others. Like, it's not that one, it's not that one, it's not that one. Okay, there we go. This one, we're like different file number, and so we kind of know where to look. So at this point in time, we're like, yeah, we got this. Like, now we just go back to those other tools and like keep going. But first, I have a quick break. It's kind of a visual puzzle. So I guess the first person to laugh gets it. You know, maybe I'll give you a little hint. Okay, I had like way too much fun with this. Okay, so we're still not done. Even though we know where this is, we think we know where this is going. I did some, like, that kind of stuff with the ancestors is kind of a little hacky, so we want to verify, yes, we actually are coming from where we thought we were. So we put a caller.inspect. It checks out, looks pretty good. And then we just keep on going, keep on iterating, and it's just like it's almost as if we were using a debugger where we are just going down down our trace, but we're doing it manually and just in Ruby. The thing I really like about this is you have absolute total control, and Ruby knows exactly how Ruby is going to be using itself, and it's also works on Rubinius, works on JRuby, works on like everywhere. Also, if you accidentally leave this in your code, your production system isn't going to blow up, but your logs might be horrible. So yeah, take it or leave it. At the end of the day, we keep on following this rabbit hole, and we end up at a nice little file, action dispatch routing route set, which if you kind of look really close enough, I know it's sort of big and large, we have these options, and it actually turns out that we're pulling default options for URL 4. And so this is, like this is where we're actually using that, we're consuming that host parameter. So at this point in time, like this is success. We have like gone through our great journey into the depths of Rails with zero knowledge of like how any of like all of these classes and hundreds of lines of code or thousands even work, and we've actually figured out where we need to fix our bug or where this problem is occurring, and it's kind of like G.I. Joe, knowing is half the battle. Like if you can't find or be able to reproduce what's going on, then you're totally lost. So this will help you get there. But now what? It's a pretty reasonable question. Like obviously we want to reproduce the problem. So and I do want to mention one thing: whenever you do the bundle open something and you actually save that and then rerun your code, then that's actually, I wouldn't do anything more than puts in there, because you're actually modifying your files. And then even if you fix something in that, but then you deploy it to another system, it's not going to have those code changes. So just a word of caution. But locally, we can actually attempt a fix, just as long as you realize that it's not going to be a permanent fix. This is something that we want to fix it, and then we want to push it upstream into Rails. We want to open up a pull request. So for this, we're going to be raising awareness by opening up an issue, and like if you figured out, oh hey, I know, like I can see easily how we can fix this, I'm just going to open up a pull request. If not, if you're just like, if somebody opens up an issue and they're like, hey, I found a problem and this is the exact line where it's coming from, I am like, thank you, you are like a wonderful person. Like I understand that you didn't solve this, but like like I would have had to have done this manually anyway, and by you doing this, you learned more about the library and you gave me a leg up. So for the actual outcome of this particular scenario was Rails pull request issue number 9794, and the end result, the change looked a little bit something like this. So we're just taking a look and seeing if the host has a protocol specified, like HTTP, HTTPS. If it does, we're going to go ahead and pull that out so that your code no longer silently blows up. Is that a thing? Can something silently blow up? We'll say it can. And so now and this is in Rails 4, if you accidentally make this change, we will basically just automatically do the right thing for you. And really, like the more I've been doing this, and the more I've been saying like, oh, I actually have a problem with the way something works in this library, or something that I don't like, and the more you actually dig into your source code, typically once you kind of have an idea about how things actually work and how they fit together, the solution becomes a lot more obvious. So just really kind of quick, these are some other things that I use really, really frequently in terms of Ruby to figure out what other things I even can do in Ruby. We can call object method or methods, and that'll just give us a list of all of the methods I can call on that object. Or we can call instance methods, and the really nice thing about that is if you call it on a module, then and pass in false, it'll give you only the instance methods of that class or module, and none of the ancestors. So I also want to let you know that it's not always this complex. Like we have some of these tools in our tool belt, and but like at the end of the day, this was like I've been doing this for a really long time in a bunch of really arbitrary libraries, and this is like by far the hardest example that I could like come up with. And it was just kind of perfect because I got the opportunity to like actually fix a bug and like talk about it. Like, what's greater than like programming and talking about programming? Like, it's awesome. And so like, you might be saying like, okay, well that's kind of cool, but like, I don't know. And like, I just want you to start thinking about maybe, rather than just being like, oh, stuff is broken, to go in and actually understand how like the mechanisms by which the libraries you use work. And it can help you go from a bug reporter to a bug fixer, or even from a non-bug reporter to a bug reporter. That's definitely a possibility. It can help you troubleshoot libraries. It can even help you troubleshoot your own code, which is amazing. Or even better, your coworker's code. Or even better, the code you wrote like 5 months ago that you don't remember how it works. And one thing that, it's funny, the more I do this, the more I'm reminded of how like readability of code actually is kind of a feature, and it's not something that we look at. Well, I guess being Rubyists, we do care about beautiful code, but you notice like whenever we ran into that super situation, it's actually really mentally complex. Like there was no way for me to figure out logically what was actually going to happen without some sort of a debugger or some sort of a Ruby what's going on, and maybe like next time you are in need of using super, like ask yourself, is it going to be clear what's going to happen? Or maybe, hey, is there another way we can do this? Should we maybe be is there maybe a better pattern, maybe a more readable pattern? So that's just something to kind of consider. At the end of the day, like if you take nothing technical away from this, source location is going to show you where you're going, and like if you Google Ruby source location, you can get all sorts of fun examples. And caller is going to show you where you've been, and that's going to allow you to kind of just jump up and jump down the stack. And at the end of the day, Ruby is really, really powerful, and it's such a great language. And so, like, it's kind of almost amazing to me that Ruby can just give you this introspection about itself. It's like a psychiatrist diagnosing themselves or something like that. So, okay, last plug. Please go and check out codetriage.com. And I don't actually think I have time for questions. Anybody? Do I? Okay, I have time for questions, and I have Heroku stickers. I don't have enough for all of you, but I have some Heroku stickers. Any questions?
Hello.
Hi.
So you're working at Heroku, and Heroku. So my question is, how is Heroku leveraging Ruby in its infrastructure, like different ways?
How are we whatting our infrastructure?
How Heroku is leveraging Ruby in its own infrastructure in building Heroku?
So like with Heroku, it's really, really super easy to just spin up apps, and you can just make an app for like different stuff. So when you actually visit Heroku.com, you're secretly visiting like maybe 30 or 40 completely separate apps. And most of them are running on Ruby. Sinatra or Rails, our APIs are all powered by Ruby, and we take kind of a very service-oriented approach towards developing that regard. Also, it's nice, very much like Ruby, like you can develop a single application that works kind of like a module that you can reuse in different places. Like other services can reuse that service. So we use Ruby quite a bit internally. Did that? Okay, cool. We gotta.
Do you always clean up your gem files after doing this?
I'm sorry, can you speak a little slower?
Do you always clean up the gem files after doing this?
Do I always clean the gems after doing this? I try. It's in a lot of libraries, it's not too bad because I can just search like puts. I can do Control, Command, Shift, F. And by the way, that's totally an effective debugging technique, is just search all of your library for this string. But sometimes not, and sometimes I don't need to. Like sometimes I can, I can just remove, like if I know I was in Rails and I completely screwed it up, like I know I can just delete it and like reinstall the gem, which is really nice. And it's also another important thing I guess I didn't mention is when you're actually pushing these fixes, you wouldn't push them from your gem version, you would actually go and clone Rails/Rails and then make a pull request directly to it.
And what if you break something? While making a fix, what if you break something? Because I don't think we can test gems. Can we?
So if you break something like locally in your own project, or
Yes.
I mean, like I said, it's not too bad. I just will remove the gem and reinstall it. Typically, whenever I'm debugging like this, I will only make really mostly it's puts, which won't affect anything. And whenever I actually do, like I said, actually attempt to fix, I try to keep it really small until I can conceptually understand the code that's going on, and then I will move that to a branch of like actual Rails.
And so if you want to develop a new functionality to a gem, so do you like open an issue first, or do you just manually do it before and then issue a pull request?
So the question was, if I want functionality of a gem, do I open up an issue first and ask for it, or do I just open up a pull request? It depends on the gem and on the gem authors. In Rails, we don't take feature requests and issues. Like if you look at, there's 500, 600 issues open on Rails, and like if we took feature requests, it would be insane. So specifically for Rails, if you want a feature, if you really want a feature and you don't know how to make it, you can reach out to the community and talk about it. You can reach out to the mailing list and talk about it, or hopefully get somebody involved. Reach out to a Rails contributor at a conference is a great option. Typically, I like most of the features I want, I just implement, if I can implement it really quickly in like a day or so, then I'll just do that and then I'll submit a pull request. If it's going to take me longer than that, another option is actually implementing it as a standalone library. So even if the author of that, say the author of Devise or Rails or whatever you're trying to get it into, decides we're not 100% sure on this, you can still continue to use that functionality through an extra gem. And it even gives you the benefit of you can point at it and be like, look, this gem is super popular and like everybody freaking loves it. Wouldn't it be great if it was also part of this library? Did that?
Thank you.
Okay. That was good. Good question. Good series of questions.
I wanted to ask about what are your views on monkey patching, because in the example you showed about the protocol HTTP, it's not always like it is going to be patched in fourth version, Rails 4th version. So we are not using Rails 4 and we'll be using 3.2. So many times we end up having monkey patches, and there are too much of monkey patching. So what do you think about it?
I would recommend against monkey patches in general. Just so one of the really bad patterns that happened to the Rails community was before gems and Rails engines were super popular. We had plugins, and like you would, instead of installing a gem, you would just install this plugin, and then instead of making a fix and pushing it to the library author and then publishing a gem, like you would just make the fix locally in your plugin, which is great until something else broke that you have no idea how to fix. And then you're like, oh, I need updates. And then suddenly you have a diverging branch, like you have a forked branch of this. And so whenever you're making monkey patches to like fix problems, you're basically forking somebody else's code. And anytime you fork somebody's code, you're now the maintainer of it. So like ideally you'd be able to push those changes upstream to that library. Or even if not, you could still maybe even try standardizing by like taking those monkey patches out and putting them into a separate library. And even if not other people are going to use it, even if not other people are going to install like monkey patch my class or fix this other thing, you'll be able to at least isolate that code and reproduce functionality across different projects. But I find one of the best ways to avoid that situation is to just try to actually stay up to date with versions and be really active with whenever you do find a bug, or like Steve was talking about Rails 3.2.13 and like everybody on Hacker News got like super upset because all of these things broke, right? Well, there was a release candidate out for a full week and nobody had reported any of those bugs because nobody had tried it. And so as a community, I think we need to be a little bit better with being proactive and actually trying out those things. And like it's Rails and Ruby and all of these things are entirely community-driven projects. And like, guess what? You are the community. So like if we're not fixing these things and working on these things, I totally took that on a major tangent, but did I address maybe a little bit of your question?
Sorry, we are kind of running out of time. But you can definitely grab hold of him during the conference. He should be here.
Yes, please. I've got stickers and I'll be wearing a black shirt. Please ask me questions. I love questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.